Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Welcome back to the MUTEK Recorder. I hope you've all had a restful weekend and you're feeling primed and ready to dive back into another week of thrilling conversations in cyberspace. My name is Claire L. Evans. I am a writer and musician based in Los Angeles, California, which, beyond being, of course, the beating heart of the universe, is also the ancient, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Tongva and Chumash people. I will be your host for the next half hour, here to recap the goings on of today's forum. But if you can't get enough of all of this, then I urge you to dive even deeper by looking at the work that my colleagues over at HOLO magazine have been doing in the background, behind the scenes, behind the screens, every day of this forum. Greg and Alexander from HOLO have been watching everything, listening to everything, and synthesizing everything important from this forum into an evolving, ambitious publishing experiment called the MUTEK Recorder dossier, which they are publishing in real time over on the HOLO magazine website. It is truly a spectacular aggregation of citations, links, ideas, hot takes, images, and everything you might want to remember from this forum. So every day I will be sharing some highlights from that dossier in this daily live stream, but I encourage you to explore it on your own. I guarantee there will be things there that you haven't thought of, that you missed the first time around, or that you'll just want to explore a lot further. We're now entering the back half, the B side of this hybrid publishing experiment dossier daily live stream experiment. Last week, we had a great week. We were lucky to be joined by all kinds of special guests, Yuri Suzuki, Mindy Su, Samane Moafi, and Dorothy Santos. And we're going to be keeping up the pace this week with another all-killer, no-filler lineup of brilliant thinkers, different special guests who will join us every day on the recorder to share their interpretation of what recording means for them in their practice. If you're just joining us now for the first time, don't sweat it. You're welcome here. Thank you for coming. Before we get to today's guest, let's pop over to the dossier and take a look at some of the highlights of the forum today. Here we go. So we kicked off this morning with a keynote from Tactical Tech's Safa Ghanem, who drew from Tactical Tech's digital detox kit to share strategies for cutting through the noise of social media. Ghanem began by acknowledging that a digital detox is essentially impossible by definition, since we increasingly rely on smartphones as a lifeline to connect us to essential services and to the social fabric of our communities near and far. So we can't just throw our phones into the ocean as much as we would like to. Only folks in an ocean of privilege can even entertain that notion. And as Ghanem pointed out, going full cold turkey on social media is not sustainable, nor is it really the point. She argued that taking an explicit, dogmatic, no screens stance is reductive because, of course, there are plenty of productive and healthy things that we do on screens, like writing or building websites or making digital art or even participating in a global festival like this one, for example. So the real work of digital detoxing is to find novel ways to kind of short circuit our defaults and use our screens in a way that really aligns with our values, which is tricky, right? Because when the data traces that we leave whenever we use social media at any level live a whole life outside of us, we don't have much control over aligning our screen time with our values, because our data is bought and sold, it's aggregated and used by all kinds of commercial and state actors, even plays a role in electoral politics, as was discussed a little bit in this panel. So a detox isn't just about putting your phone away and going camping. It might be about something a little bit more nuanced, like tweaking your app settings or changing your browsing habits to limit the ways your data is used and exploited. It might take the form of experimenting with forms of creative obfuscation to baffle and confuse our big tech overlords. It might also be taking a moment to think about the environmental impact of our technology use, or perhaps taking a more critical stance about the information we access through social media and work to combat misinformation in our media diet. Now, as we know, and as Ghanem took pains to say twice during this keynote, in the current business model of the internet, more engagement equals more profit. The whole damn thing is built to keep us inside, clicking deeper and deeper. It's kind of like a Vegas casino pumped with lightly scented air and detached from the clock and the circadian rhythms of the outside world. So I can't change the business model of the internet, is something that Ghanem said during this keynote, to which I would counter, but what if we could? I would hope that the rapid emergence and evolution of Web3 technologies, for example, might give us all an opportunity to try out some different business models, hopefully sooner rather than later. Um, this panel inspired me to bust out a classic, Jenny Odell's fantastic book, How to Do Nothing, which places that digital detox culture thinking into a historical lineage of absolutist refusal dating back to the ancient Greek Epicurean school. The desire to drop out from the rat race is all too common. Odell cites, of course, the failed utopian communes of the Back to the Land movement and the Silicon Valley obsession with seasteading. But utopia, of course, means no place, and attempts to sidestep the world completely, however well intentioned, often lead to myopia, tyranny, and total collapse. Instead of that kind of renunciation, Odell argues for a refusal in place, a way of standing apart from the world without running away from it. She writes, I will quote, "To stand apart is to look at the world now from the point of view of the world as it could be, the future, with all of the hope and sorrowful contemplation that this entails." I think that we learned some strategies to do that this morning from the keynote, and I'm, for one, quite appreciative. We hopped from that keynote directly into a roundtable presentation about, let's see, non-human explorations into algorithmic creativity. I found this one to be a great shot chaser to last week's panel discussion on the question of autonomy and intention in art and AI, which is documented in the dossier here as well. Because now not only are we thinking about the human in the loop and the intention of that human, but we're exploring the ways that that human in the loop might actually intentionally misuse or poke the algorithm to their own ends. So now Tukui contextualize this in terms of the history of music technology, explaining that this is a history of misuse, misapplication, and misappropriation. And I love that framing. He said, for example, that the inventor of the vinyl record had no way of anticipating turntablism, right? They that came as a surprise to those inventors. That was an innovation wrought by artists using records, quote unquote, wrong. And there's lots of good examples of this throughout the history of music. Another good example I can think of off the dome is the early history of the synthesizer and the drum machine, technologies which were initially created to replace string sections and drummers, live drummers, for the purposes of creating more inexpensive demo recordings. Many musicians at the time were seriously opposed to this. The British Musicians Union, bless their hearts, tried to ban synthesizers in the 80s. But the thing that happened, and the thing that seems to always happen, is that artists sort of took a beat, started playing around with these technologies, and then used them to create techno, hip hop, new wave, post punk, house, basically all of the interesting music of the 20th century. And this seems to happen again and again. Technologies arrive that claim to simplify a process while implicitly displacing, automating creative workers. Some creative workers stop that from happening by making the technology central to a new form of creative work that only they can do. So it's kind of like diffusing a bomb by turning it into an engine. And why should AI be any different from that? I think that's quite an exciting proposition. I look forward to seeing more artists break, misuse, and misappropriate AI technologies. I'm all for breaking things mindfully and breaking with convention to fix the future where appropriate. Speaking of fixing the future, I am thrilled to introduce our guest today, a great instigator of more thoughtful todays and better tomorrows. My guest today is the writer, artist, coder, and organizer Xiaowei Wang. Xiaowei is the author of my favorite book published last year, Blockchain Chicken Farm, and Other Stories of Tech in China's Countryside, which you have not, if you have not read this book yet, please do yourself the favor. It's wonderful. They're also the creative director of Logic Magazine and one of the lead facilitators of the Logic School, an organizing community for tech workers. I'm such a big fan of their work, and I'm so delighted to welcome them to the program. Hello, Xiaowei, the screen is yours. Welcome.
Hello. Hi,
Nice to
it's
see
so
you.
good to
Hi.
see you.
I love it's iconic
Hi.
that we're matching.
I know this was unplanned. Maybe it's a California prerequisite that you
No,
have
we're
to
we're
wear
tech
overalls.
workers. Yeah, exactly. Okay, carry on.
Hi, I'm Xiaowei, and yes, as Claire said, I wrote a book last year called Blockchain Chicken Farm and Other Stories of Tech in China's Countryside. And my work really centers around, I would say, thinking through tech ecology in the format of generally community art projects. The book itself is about tech in China's countryside and looks at a series of different moments. So, blockchain chicken farm, this literal chicken farm that I visited, where all of the chickens wore actually chicken Fitbits that tracked their movements. They were heavily surveilled, and blockchain was used in order to guarantee food safety and track provenance. I also looked at the case of AI farming pigs at an industrial scale, as well as e-commerce villages. And I think that one thread, especially the ecological and environmental thread, really I started thinking about the environmental impacts of computing. And it's interesting when we say environment, it's always like this separate thing, but we are literally in the environment. We are part of the ecology. And so one of the things that I got really interested in was, well, how is labor shifting? How is land shifting in response to things like, AI, blockchain, things like that? So yes, there are the environmental impacts, the use of the electricity, but there's also the land changes, like, all the small, they get consolidated, becoming industrial farms, less people become farmers. What's the story of this and what does the genesis of this look like on the ground? In terms of recording, I would say I feel like, so in the book, I have a lot of speculative recipes, and recipes are this format that I really see as a way of both recording in the field. So whenever I visit people, I actually tend not to take a lot of photos and end up sharing meals with them and gathering recipes. Um, and also at home, I think recipes are a way for me to structure different kinds of speculation, thinking through things, thinking through the material. Just to go back to the AI farming pigs example, one of the things in industrial hog farming is that when pigs get stressed out, they actually bite each other's tails off. And so they're trying to do like these genetically modified pigs without tails. And so I actually have a speculative recipe for a red braised pork tail, which is a delicacy in the future after everything becomes industrially farmed. There's also an impermanence to recipes that I really love. And there's kind of an embodied recording that I feel like is, for all the beautiful things about being connected to everyone at this moment through the internet, that recipes really represent. So actually, instead of showing slides, it's going to just quickly show everyone some of the things that I have in my kitchen right now. I just moved, so I'm getting set up, but it's a really hot day here in the Bay Area, which is very strange. It's usually not so hot. And I have osmanthus flower. So I'm going to make a tea out of that. And this is a really beautiful cooling drink. And so I also put in licorice root, some hawthorn slices, some hibiscus. So it's interesting. My grandmother told me this story about hibiscus, where when she was growing up, they didn't have nail polish in the 1930s in China. So they actually would brew hibiscus tea and like dip their fingernails in the tea to dye their fingernails red. And then I have tangerine peel. So all of these, like I'll put them actually into this denabe, so this clay pot later, and just brew it for like half an hour. And if I'm feeling adventurous, I'll actually take some ume, so pickled sour plum, and put that in there as well. I was told the reason why you use a clay pot is because the clay, because it comes from the earth, when you brew things in it, it literally, similar to wine or everything, like that, it has the taste of the earth from where it's from. And so this clay pot I got When I travel, I buy cooking tools, so I got this from Kyoto. But yeah, I this is one of those things where I do wish that you could smell this incredible osmanthus flower tea right here. But yeah, this is, I feel like food and drink recipes, that's my way of recording things. I think it's all about presence and impermanence and acknowledging the impermanence of that and being in the present. Some things that I'm working on that are upcoming is actually thinking about food and food that specifically induces dreams. So, um, you know, it's funny because we use the term technology to describe so many things. But there's actually like, you know, people who think like, oh, dreams are a technology. Or it reminds me of that Wim Wenders movie, Until the End of the World, where at the end of the world, people are watching their dreams on TV and people become like addicted to watching their dreams. But yeah, so food that induces bizarre dreams. That's currently what I'm thinking through. So yeah, these are some of the things that are in my kitchen studio right now. I really love thinking about the kitchen as a studio or a gallery. Because you know there's always something that's really feminized about the kitchen and often ignored. You know, recipes are often discredited because it's seen as a form of feminized labor. But some of the earliest computers, if you go to the computing museum in San Jose, it's actually like these kitchen computers that have all the recipes. So it's really interesting to think about. I think I'm out of time, so I'll hand it back to you, Claire. And
I
happy
have
to
no idea what
discuss
our
more.
time constraints are anymore because we started late. But wow, so many threads here that I want to explore, and we have so little time. But I love that you shouted out Until the End of the World, a movie that I watched like the 6 hour version of at one point during the pandemic. And like the way that, I mean, this is totally tangential, but the way that Wim Wenders represented like what dreams look like in that film is so interesting to me. And I did a little research into it, and it turns out that he used like really, really early HD video technology, like so early that he had to go to like a lab at NHK in Japan where it was like being developed, and he was allowed to basically go into this room with this new technology upon the blessing of NHK with all these scientists and his editor, and he just locked himself up in there for a few months trying to figure out how to visualize dreams. And what he ended up doing was, I don't know exactly what the process was, but the end result is incredibly glitchy and lo-fi. And I think this the irony of using an incredibly cutting edge technology designed to be, you know, super high fidelity. I think it was like, yeah, the early HD video, and making it look like this burned out hazy dream. I mean, I'm sure he totally stepped on a lot of people's toes in terms of, you know, being something of a disappointment for popularizing this technology. But I think that's a really poetic gesture and something that we should all probably try and strive for. Like, take the most cutting edge thing and turn it into a soft, gauzy approximation of memory or
This
dreams. Like,
appropriation,
yes,
like
exactly.
you were
Back to
just saying.
misappropriation. Yes, exactly. That's probably why I'm so into it. Okay, questions. I can't help but see an analogy between this use of recipes as a framing metaphor and code. I mean, do you I mean, I think like programming is a kind of number recipe, right? Coding is number recipes. Is that how you think about it too? Are there kind of is there cross-pollination that happens between those two sides of your brain?
Yeah, I feel like there's with coding, I mean, and recipe making, it's like the precision of recipes and like, you know, the it kind of has to work every time if you like write it out. And I think with coding too, like, you know, there's always the age-old like when you're teaching someone how to code for the first time, like instructions to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Um, I do think that what's interesting is that with food recipes, there's always like, I mean, code recipes too have this, but maybe less pronounced, is that food recipes, like, they're made in the context of like things like famine, war, socio-political change. And there's often recipes that are just like, take a handful of something and put it in there
Yeah.
and you might not have chicken because it's a time of famine. So that's like, I love also the kind of troubling of that. precision.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you can definitely make more mistakes putting together a stew than you can if you're like writing a piece of software. I mean, it's kind of up to personal taste at a certain point too.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Although I guess I have seen pretty buggy software as well.
Maybe it's not buggy. Maybe it's just seasoned slightly differently, you know? It's got like a little bit more salt, a little bit more coriander than you would personally choose, but it still holds up, something like that. I don't know. We don't need to draw the
Yeah.
connection too explicitly. This is kind of a sidebar, but it's something I wanted to ask you because I was lurking on your website this morning and I noticed that you're a certified tarot reader. And I'm curious about how that practice informs your work, like either in terms of thinking about the future or just thinking about how you kind of develop the sorts of correlations and associations between ideas that make your writing really sing.
Yeah, I think I mean, tarot is a big part of just my day to day. But it does inform a lot of how I think about AI used in a predictive sense.
Mm,
Because, there's so many threads of divination historically. But one of the people who was in Queen Elizabeth's court, who was actually responsible for the term British Empire, who then, after coining the term, gave impetus to create the British Empire. Like he was a court magician and did divination and tarot and scrying and all these things. And so when I read tarot, it's kind of this funny thing. It's like I'm the human algorithm in a sense, but instead of helping people predict their future, I think it's about examining the present and the data before them in a really thoughtful way. So I definitely don't tell people this is you will meet someone in 3 months, etc. It's more about getting a map of their present
yeah.
situation. Yeah,
Oh, that's a great
yeah,
analogy. Yeah. I mean, that's always the way that I try to think about AI because I feel like whenever whenever AI goes terribly wrong, it's when we're blindly extrapolating a new future from the existing past without reckoning with the data, without, using this funhouse mirror that we've constructed in order to see ourselves more clearly. And that's when we go off the rails, is thinking that everything is so linear and so literal. But it is an amazing tool for understanding how we got to where we are, I think. And I'm surprised that it's not used in that capacity more often. Maybe there are tons of AI divination art projects that I'm just not aware of, but I think that it's a super fertile area of exploration. That's maybe for another book.
I know.
Yeah. You
Another misappropriative use.
That's yeah, that'll just be on my tombstone. You talk a lot about speculation during your brief but wonderful presentation. What is your relationship to science fiction? Do you read a lot of science fiction?
um, I do. I feel like more recently, the one thing that I read, which I was not only really proud of making it all the way through, but reading it in the original Chinese was this book called The Other Shore of Humanity by Ha
Mm,
Fong. So, um, she wrote Folding Beijing, and she's actually an economist by day. And so, in this think tank, and then at night, she's this prolific sci-fi writer, and it's this incredible, as I think all good sci-fi does, satire, but also really incisive and just puts you in this world. And so she has this one famous short story called Folding Beijing, where it's about class under
hmm
capitalism. But her book, The Other Shore of Humanity, is actually a Buddhist reference. So yeah, that was my most recent sci-fi binge. Was a lot of her short stories.
I think yeah, the speculative is a very powerful tool, especially if even just when it comes to being able to ad lib about what you think the world is like without anybody really holding you to it because it has yet to unfold.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, can you share with us a little bit more about your upcoming project? I'm very tantalized by this idea of recipes that encourage dreams, and perhaps you could even share with us fragments of a recipe that might encourage the kinds of dreaming that would be productive for thinking about the future.
Um, so there's actually been a lot of sleep studies done on undergrads by like, academic psychologists. And so I started delving into that, like, you know, whole of research. But one of the recipes that I'm really thinking through is using like Sichuan spice, because spicy food apparently always gives you like intense, vivid dreams.
Mm.
And then on top of that, for some reason, dairy. Um, and so I'm trying to reconfigure that into I was thinking of like spicy mango, which is a thing, plus like whipped cream on top of like a sherbet or like a fruit sherbet.
Ooh, interesting. Complex. Have you experimented? Are you making dream food and then logging your dreams to see if they're working?
Yes. Although the one of the discoveries that threw me for a wrench was that actually eating a lot of fish and salmon, I guess because it's so fatty, that's
Mm.
just, I asked my friends to also like try it, like try, the spicy chili oil, which calling dream juice, and then like try that, or like try salmon and tell me what you think. So, but my sample size is so small, I would not entrust this as part of like a actual data set.
I'm so interested in that though. I think that, yeah, we should be doing more sleep experiments on ourselves. I mean, we have nothing else going on this day and age. Like we're all stuck at home. We might as well be setting off all kinds of fireworks into our dream states. I, for one, have been like taking down my dreams in the morning for the first time in my adult life since the dawn of the pandemic, and I found that it is like a wildly fertile. I mean, obviously, like the entire history of art is just a history of people learning how to interpret their dreams more effectively. But it really is like a super fertile, just well to draw from. It's like you could just transcribe your dreams, and that's poetry right there. It's like you're basically plagiarizing yourself without consequence.
Totally. Have you tried inducing dreams or nursing
No,
dreams?
no, what is that?
There's like all sorts of like, oh, like before bed, you like think about certain things, or there's this other thing where um you can drink your dream. So you put a glass of water next to on your nightstand, and when you're dreaming, the water, because water has like contains like, it can like apparently soak up your dream, and then in the morning you like drink the water. I don't know. This
I
is
love that. I mean, I'll
like,
try it. I remember reading a book when I was a kid on lucid dreaming and out of body, sort of manifestations where you could kind of learn to control your actions within your dreams. And I tried it and it kind of worked once so effectively that it kind of scared me straight. Like I didn't it was like I entered into a realm of dream consciousness that frightened me, and I'm not sure that I want to go back that far. But maybe I just need a good someone to walk me through it. Uh okay, so shifting gears, can you tell us a little bit about this workshop that you're facilitating on Wednesday as part of MUTEK? It seems really interesting, and also like a potentially fertile use of creative misappropriation of technology.
definitely. It's called The Future of Memory, and it's a workshop that I'm doing with my collaborator Q. And we built a series of tools to bypass algorithmic censorship. So automated censorship that happens a lot in places like China, but also, throughout the world. And so we have one tool called the Hanzi Maker. So it lets you take parts of Chinese radicals and put it together into an entirely different word. So when you post it
Oh.
online, it bypasses the automation. And so, yeah, just trying to think through like these different ways of, kind of jamming up or gumming up the machine through this new made up language, really.
Do you imagine a speculative future in which we're all speaking made up languages, living a spicy lucid dreams, and I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with
I'm here for it. I'm excited for that future.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful that you're here to guide us into it, and thank you so much for joining us on this program. It's been a total delight to see you face to face. Listeners, viewers, there are still some spots left in this workshop, I think. So if you want to participate, I would encourage you to hop to it. I think it's not like part of this ecosystem, right? It's on Zoom. It's more participatory than some of the other MUTEK happenings, which is will be a really nice opportunity to get hands-on and create things in real space with other human beings. So I highly recommend you do that. Tomorrow, everyone, the forum will host conversations about the poetics of interactive clothing, the distribution challenges of XR and NFTs, the blockchain, and the changing dynamics of the music industry. So much to explore and think about. We will be here at the end of the day, as we are every day for the next 3 days. And my guest on the recorder will be the Swiss artist and designer Jörg Lenny. I am looking forward to that conversation, as I am looking forward to the rest of the conversations this week. If you have a little bit of time today and you're not totally burned out, I highly recommend you check out, again, the dossier that my colleagues are building over on HOLO Magazine, MUTEK Recorder dossier, which, you know, I show you what is available to be seen by the time we go live every day, but they're constantly building it out. And there's more and more and more. And in fact, I think my colleagues have now begun to archive these very streams, so you can catch up on things that you might have missed. For example, our episode with Mindy Sue, our episode with Samane Moafi, and so on and so forth. So please enjoy taking a look at that. And until tomorrow, have a great day, and thank you so much for joining me.